In Japan, they call baseball star Shohei Ohtani Nito-Ryu, the two-sword samurai. Both of his hands are weapons. He bats left and pitches right, recalling the legendary samurai who fought with a blade in each hand. But 400 years ago, there was another Nito-Ryu warrior who carried a secret that could have destroyed his legacy before it began, a secret that turned him from outcast into a legend. Ancient Nito-Ryu. That nickname, Nito-Ryu, isn't just clever marketing. Nito-Ryu literally means two-sword style, and it comes from one of the most revolutionary fighting techniques in samurai history, Hyoho Niten Ichi-ryū, the school of two heavens as one, created by Miyamoto Musashi, the most famous swordsman who ever lived. Musashi won over 60 duels, never losing a single fight. And his secret weapon wasn't just skill, it was a technique that shouldn't have existed. Similarly, Ohtani, who's already shattered the 50-home run barrier several times, might one day challenge the legendary 60-home run mark that few have ever reached. The Forbidden Hand. In Musashi's time, using two swords wasn't just unusual, it was almost unheard of. Traditional samurai training focused on a two-handed grip. Power came from both hands working together to strike with a single blade. One-handed techniques existed for horseback, for injury, or close-quarters combat with the wakizashi, the shorter of a samurai's two swords. These one-handed techniques were meant to be used in edge-case scenarios, not the primary technique in Musashi's era, the late Sengoku, or Warring States period. But Musashi, throughout centuries of tradition, he developed a fighting style that required incredible one-handed strength, skill, and coordination. The question isn't why he created this revolutionary technique. The question is, why did Japan's greatest warrior need to fight with his left hand at all? The answer reveals a cultural pressure that persisted in Japan for centuries and created the perfect opportunity for rebels to rewrite the rules of combat, making an outcast into a legend. One problem, two swords. In Musashi's time, using two swords at once wasn't just unusual, it was almost unheard of. Every samurai carried two swords, the katana and the shorter wakizashi. But they only fought with one at a time. Traditional schools taught one principle, two hands, one sword, maximum power through unified grip. But Musashi asked a simple question that no one else had. Why carry two swords if you only use one? The mechanical advantage. In the Book of Five Rings, Musashi wrote, "It is not good to wield a sword with both hands when riding or when running." But the real challenge wasn't just strength, it was independence. Each hand had to work separately, like writing different letters with each hand at the same time. Most samurai spent decades perfecting one motion over and over again. Musashi had to master two completely different weapons simultaneously. The long sword for offense, the short sword for defense, attack and defense in the same instant. The hidden pattern. But there was something else about Musashi, something historians noticed in his paintings, his calligraphy, his fighting stance, something in the way he held his brush, the angle of his sword draws, the preference in his footwork. Many scholars believe Musashi was naturally left-handed. In an age when left-handed children were strictly corrected and retrained to use their right hand, this would have forced him to become ambidextrous from childhood. While other samurai trained one dominant hand, Musashi had spent his entire life using both, just like a baseball player from Oshu who throws with his right but bats from the left. Two weapons, two hands, one devastating advantage. The tactical revolution. In combat, Musashi's two-sword style presented unique challenges most samurai had never faced. Against a traditional swordsman, distance meant everything. Too close, and you couldn't swing properly. Too far, and you couldn't reach. But Musashi had two ranges. The katana could strike at full extension. The wakizashi controlled the inside space. Against him there was no safe distance. In the Book of Five Rings he explained, "When the enemy attacks, you deflect with the companion's sword and strike with the long sword." Simple in theory, difficult to master in practice. The mirror stance problem. But the real advantage might have been psychological. Traditional sword schools taught pattern recognition and enforced their styles ruthlessly. Watch your opponent's stance, predict their attack. Years of training built these into instincts, moves and countermoves. If Musashi was truly left-handed, his movements would have been naturally reversed, his strong side, opposite to what opponents expected. In modern fencing, left-handed fighters have a distinct advantage. Studies show they win 15% more often than statistics predict. Not because they're necessarily more skillful, because they're different and harder for their opponents to read. In baseball, left-handed batters hit .260 against right-handed pitchers, but only .230 against lefties. The unfamiliar angle changes everything. Proof: the duel at Ganryu Island. Musashi's most famous victory? The Ganryu Island duel. There he defeated his most famous and skilled rival, Sasaki Kojiro, with what was essentially a baseball bat, a wooden oar he carved on the long boat ride to the island. Think about that. Japan's greatest swordsman won his most legendary duel with little more than a club. Not two swords, not even one. He didn't use a traditional weapon at all. Being unpredictable was part of Musashi's game plan. He arrived hours late, positioned the sun behind him, used a weapon with a longer reach than Kojiro expected. When they finally faced each other in the heat of battle, a single sudden strike to the head earned him victory. Kojiro never had a chance to gauge the distance. Musashi's advantage wasn't limited to a particular set of weapons or fighting style. It was about thinking differently, fighting differently, being what no one expected, keeping his enemies off balance. Ohtani, like Musashi before him, doesn't limit himself to baseball's unwritten rules, specializing in either pitching or hitting. The greatest warriors in any arena make their own rules, and sometimes that means turning a piece of driftwood into one of the most famous weapons in samurai history, or turning ambidextrous ability, forced by stern correction during childhood, into a nearly unstoppable advantage. The way of two swords. After decades of dueling, Musashi retired to a cave, a place of peace and isolation. There he wrote the Book of Five Rings, his philosophy of combat. Hyoho Niten Ichi-ryū, the school of two heavens as one. Not just a fighting technique, a way of thinking. In the Book of Five Rings he wrote, "If you hold a sword with both hands, it is difficult to wield it freely to left and right." A practical observation, but also something deeper. When you become accustomed to wielding the long sword with one hand, you can handle any weapon. Not just the daisho, the two-sword combination that marked one out as samurai. Any tool, any situation, any challenge. Musashi's fundamental skill was being adaptable, a sentiment echoed by another famous martial artist, Bruce Lee. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water. You put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put it into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. Water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend. If you train only one way, you have only one solution. Train with two hands independently, and you have infinite possibilities, on the battlefield and in life. Modern echoes. 400 years later, Shohei Ohtani faces the same skepticism Musashi once did. Choose one thing. Master it. Don't divide your focus. That was the stock advice from coaches, players, and parents. Focus on pitching or become a great hitter. Few can master both. True to his nickname, Nito-Ryu, Ohtani pursued both. In 2021, he threw 100-mile-per-hour fastballs with his right arm and hit 46 home runs batting left. The first player since Babe Ruth to excel at both at the highest level. But unlike Ruth, who eventually gave up pitching to become a world-class slugger, Ohtani refused to choose. Japanese media didn't call him the next Babe Ruth. They called him Nito-Ryu because they recognized something Americans missed. This wasn't just about baseball. It was about an ancient philosophy finally finding its modern champion. When asked why he doesn't specialize, Ohtani's answer echoes Musashi. Why would I limit myself? The legacy of the left hand. Musashi died in 1645, never knowing his technique would inspire warriors centuries later. His school still exists, 9 official dojo across Japan teaching Niten, Ichi-ryū. But his greatest legacy, one that applies today, isn't the sword technique itself. It's the proof that being different, being forced to adapt, can become your greatest strength. Today, though discouraged in some places for cultural reasons, left-handedness is no longer corrected. 10% of the world is left-handed. In professional baseball, that number jumps to 25%. In fencing, 40% of top competitors are lefties. What was once a disadvantage has become the advantage. Shohei Ohtani throws right, bats left, and refuses to choose between them. In 2023, he became the first player to hit 10 home runs and strike out 100 batters before July. Since then, he's been stacking banner seasons one after another, on pace to become the greatest baseball player of all time. Japanese fans don't just call him Nito-Ryu for his skills. They recognize the deeper connection, a player who turned being different into being dominant, 4 centuries apart. One forced to hide his left-handedness, one celebrated for his dual nature, both proving the same truth. The greatest warriors don't follow the path. They create it. 2 swords, 2 hands, 2 heavens as one. Like, subscribe, and join the newsletter for more real samurai history and epic sword content.